I stared at my reflection in the vanity mirror. The burgundy evening gown hugged my figure perfectly, but the light makeup on my face barely concealed the dark circles under my eyes, the result of weeks of insomnia. Tonight was our 5th wedding anniversary. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a moment to celebrate love. Instead, my heart felt entirely hollow. My name is Sloane Sterling, and for the past 3 years, I have felt trapped in a sprawling, cold estate in Atherton, California, sharing a life with a man I no longer recognize. My husband, Vance Whitmore. He used to be warm and attentive. We met at a charity gala sponsored by my family's tech conglomerate, and his charm swept me off my feet. But ever since the tragic car crash in Big Sur 3 years ago, that claimed both my parents' lives, leaving me the sole heir to a billion-dollar empire, Vance's demeanor had shifted. He became distant, rigid, and constantly hid behind the excuse of endless business acquisitions. We slept in the same California king bed, but a thick wall of ice divided us. He often came home late, and lately, I'd caught him making hushed, secretive phone calls on the terrace. Whenever I confronted him, he gaslighted me, calling me paranoid and unstable. I let out a long sigh, tucking a stray strand of blonde hair behind my ear. I had made up my mind. Tonight, I was going to force a heart-to-heart conversation. I wanted to save this marriage, or at least uncover what was truly happening between us. However, the fragile piece of the bedroom shattered when my iPhone vibrated aggressively on the mattress. The screen lit up. Delaney Croft, Insurance. Delaney was my late father's trusted wealth manager and insurance broker. She handled all my primary policies. It was incredibly out of character for her to call this late. I picked up the phone and swiped the screen. "Hi, Delaney. What's going on at this hour?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. There was a heavy silence on the line. I could hear Delaney take a shaky, tense breath. "Hi, Sloane. I am so sorry to bother you at home, but this is an absolute emergency. I felt you needed to know right now." I frowned, a knot of dread tightening in my chest. "What's wrong? You sound frantic. Is it a corporate liability issue?" "Not corporate, Sloane. It's your personal life insurance policy. The primary one valued at $10 million, Delaney answered rapidly, her voice trembling. "This afternoon, someone came into our downtown office. They brought a notarized power of attorney. They initiated a process to change the primary beneficiary and simultaneously tried to activate a clause for an expedited emergency payout." My heart seemingly stopped for a full second. The hand holding the phone turned ice cold. "Wait, what do you mean? I never filed for any changes. What power of attorney? The beneficiary of that policy is the Bay Area Youth Trust my mother founded. Who tried to change it?" "That's exactly the problem, Sloane." Delaney's voice dropped to a whisper, as if she feared someone was listening. "The power of attorney grants full executive rights to your husband, Vance. The document had your signature on it, officially stamped by an independent notary named Wallace Gentry. The addendum requested that in the event of your sudden passing, the entire $10 million bypasses the standard medical investigation and pays out directly to Vance's private account without a waiting period." I sat frozen. My mouth went bone dry. "My signature? I haven't signed anything in front of a notary in months." "Delaney, this has to be a fraud." "I know. The signature is a near-perfect forgery. But thankfully, our internal fraud detection system flagged it because demanding a payout without an autopsy or medical examiner's review is highly irregular for a policy of this magnitude. Since I'm your primary broker, corporate flagged me immediately. I stalled the processing, stating I needed verbal confirmation from you tomorrow morning. But Sloane, something is deeply wrong. Why is Vance using a third-party notary to alter your life insurance behind your back, especially with a clause demanding immediate payout upon your death? The air in the bedroom suddenly felt toxic. 1,000 questions and fragments of suspicion that I had been suppressing finally clicked into place. His coldness, the whispered phone calls, and now, forging documents for my life insurance. "Sloane, are you still there?" Delaney's voice snapped me back to reality. Yes, I'm here," I replied, my voice shaking. "Thank you, Delaney. Please freeze the policy. Lock down every account. Do not allow a single change without my physical presence." "Done. But please, Sloane, be careful. Do not confront Vance tonight. We don't know what his endgame is. Let's meet at the precinct or a secure location tomorrow morning. Understood? Before I could answer, the low hum of a Range Rover engine echoed from the driveway. The headlights swept across my bedroom window. My husband is home, I whispered quickly. I'm hanging up. I'll call you tomorrow. I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the bed as if it were on fire. My hands shook violently. My chest heaved as I struggled for air. My own husband was forging documents to cash out my life insurance. Why did he need $10 million in liquid cash so desperately? And the most horrifying detail, without a medical investigation. Did he want me dead? The heavy thud of the garage door closing echoed through the estate. Then, the sound of his footsteps on the hardwood stairs. His pace was agonizingly relaxed, contrasting with the frantic hammering of my pulse. I had to act normal. I couldn't let him know I was onto him. I looked at the mirror again, forcing the corners of my mouth upward. The smile looked rigid and plastic, but I had no choice. I took a deep breath, willing the tremors in my limbs to stop. The brass doorknob turned. In the mirror's reflection, I watched Vance walk in. He was still in his tailored charcoal suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, and most shockingly, he was smiling. A broad, warm, charming smile that I hadn't seen in years. The same smile I had fallen in love with. But tonight, it looked absolutely sinister. "Good evening, beautiful," Vance greeted, his voice dripping with honey, a stark contrast to his usual dismissive tone. He walked closer, keeping one hand hidden behind his back. I turned around to face him. "Good evening. You're home early." I fought to keep my voice steady. Vance chuckled softly. "It's our 5th anniversary, Sloan. I wasn't going to stay at the office late tonight. I know I've been buried in the new Silicon Valley acquisition lately, and I'm sorry I've neglected you. But I'm here to make it up to you." From behind his back, he produced a small crimson velvet box and a thick, elegant paper bag from an exclusive French patisserie in Pacific Heights. He snapped the velvet box open, revealing a breathtaking diamond pendant that caught the ambient light. "Happy anniversary, darling," he murmured, stepping into my personal space. The scent of his expensive cologne hit me like a physical blow. "May I?" I nodded stiffly, incapable of speech. Vance turned me back toward the mirror, brushing my hair off my neck. His large, cold fingers grazed my skin as he fastened the clasp. The gesture, meant to be romantic, felt like a hangman slipping a noose around my neck. I held my breath, meeting his eyes in the mirror. He was staring intently at my throat. "Stunning. It suits you perfectly," he praised, pressing a soft kiss to my shoulder. It took every ounce of my willpower not to violently flinch. "Thank you," I managed to whisper. "It's beautiful." Vance stepped away and walked over to the sitting area in our room, pulling the contents out of the paper bag. It was a bespoke Meyer lemon and raspberry genoise cake. It looked flawless. "I special ordered this from your favorite spot. Meyer lemon with the raspberry coulis," Vance said, setting the cake on a porcelain plate and picking up a silver cake knife. He sliced a generous piece and placed it on a smaller saucer. He turned around, offering the plate to me. His smile was plastered to his face, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. "Eat up, sweetheart. Tonight, we celebrate, just you and me. Take a bite," he coaxed, his tone soft but laced with undeniable command. I stared at the cake. My stomach violently rebelled. Delaney's words echoed in my skull. Without a medical investigation. I looked at my husband, then back at the delicate dessert in his hand. Beneath his charming smile and expensive gifts, I knew one thing for certain. My husband was trying to kill me, and this cake was his weapon. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the plate. The sweet aroma of butter and tart raspberry filled the air, but to me it was poison cloaked in frosting. "What's wrong, Sloan? You don't want it?" Vance asked. His voice was still smooth as silk, but I caught a flicker of lethal impatience in his eyes. I cleared my throat, swallowing what felt like sand. I'm on a strict fast, Vance. You know I have that Forbes profile photo shoot next week. I can't eat sugar this late." It was a logical excuse, but Vance was ready for it. "Oh, come on, just one bite," he insisted, pushing the plate closer until it nearly touched my chest. His free hand reached out, gripping my shoulder. "It's our special night. I went through a lot of trouble to get this. Don't ruin the mood over a silly diet. You look perfect to me. The words were sweet, but his grip on my shoulder was bruising, intimidating. My heart battered against my ribs like a trapped bird. If I refused, he'd know I was on to him. If I ate it, I'd likely never wake up. Vance, my stomach is really acting up. I tried to pivot, placing a hand over my abdomen. Let's put it in the fridge. I promise I'll have it with my coffee tomorrow. Vance's expression morphed instantly. The charming smile vanished, replaced by a clenched jaw and a dead, piercing glare. The mask was cracking. Sloane, he said, his voice dropping an octave, heavy and cold. I said, eat the cake. Now. He held a forkful of the dessert inches from my lips. My hands began to tremble. What do I do? Do I slap it away? Do I run? Where could I even hide in this massive house? At the exact second I thought my life was over, a loud knock echoed from the half-open bedroom door. Mr. Whitmore? Ma'am? So sorry to intrude. It was Greta Hess, the estate manager who had practically raised me since I was a teenager. She stood in the doorway wearing her worn flannel robe, her face looking unusually tense, slightly out of breath as if she'd sprinted up the stairs. Vance whipped his head around, glaring at her with unbridled fury for ruining his crucial moment. What the hell is it, Greta? Can't you see we are busy? I explicitly told you we weren't to be disturbed tonight. Greta lowered her head respectfully, but her eyes darted to the cake in Vance's hand. Well, sir, I just wanted to see if Mrs. Whitmore wanted me to draw a bath. I heard your car pull in, so I figured you were turning in. No. Get out and go back to your quarters, Vance spat, turning his attention back to me. Ignore her, Sloane. Open your mouth. But instead of leaving, Greta stepped boldly into the bedroom. Her strides were fast and purposeful, highly unusual for a woman in her late 50s. Oh, wow, that cake looks incredible, Mr. Whitmore, she said, artificially pitching her voice to sound famished. She wedged herself perfectly between me and Vance. Mrs. Whitmore's stomach has been in knots all day, sir. She told me earlier. It'd be a crying shame to throw it out or let it go stale in the fridge. Before Vance or I could process her words, Greta's hands moved with shocking speed. She snatched the small plate and the fork right out of Vance's hand. I'll just finish it off for you, sir. I miss dinner and I am absolutely starving, she declared with a strange, wide smile. Without wasting a millisecond, Greta shoved the entire forkful of cake into her mouth, chewing rapidly and swallowing it down in 2 aggressive gulps. Time stopped. Vance stood paralyzed, his eyes bulging out of his skull. His face drained of color as if he'd just looked the devil in the eye. He stared at the empty plate in Greta's hands, his jaw slack. What the fuck did you just do, you crazy old bitch? Vance screamed. His voice was a high-pitched shriek of absolute panic. He grabbed Greta by the shoulders, violently shaking her. Spit it out! Throw it up right now! Spit it out! I gasped, stumbling backward until I hit the vanity. Vance's reaction was explosive. If it had been a normal cake, he would have fired her for insubordination. But he wasn't angry. He was terrified. Hack. Cough. Greta suddenly began to violently hack. The plate and fork shattered on the hardwood floor. She gripped her throat with both hands, her eyes rolling back into her head. Sir, my throat, it's burning, she wheezed, her vocal cords sounding crushed. Greta, I shrieked, lunging forward to catch her. But before I could reach her, Greta collapsed onto the Persian rug. Her muscles seized violently. Her legs kicked out, her hands clawing at her own chest. It was a horrifying, full-body grand mal seizure, and the most terrifying part, thick white foam began pouring from her lips, dripping down her chin. A sickening gurgle escaped her throat, like a drowning victim fighting for air. Oh my God! Greta, hold on. I dropped to my knees, grabbing her freezing, rigid hand. Tears of sheer panic flooded my vision. I looked up at Vance, who was still standing completely frozen. Vance, do something. Call 911. She's been poisoned. Get an ambulance. But Vance didn't move toward his phone. He stared at Greta's convulsing body with a mixture of horror and pure rage. He dragged a hand down his face and muttered a curse, loud enough for me to hear. Fucking idiot. The whole plan is blown. Why the fuck did this old hag have to eat it? I stared at him in utter disbelief. He wasn't even trying to hide his guilt anymore. The mask was obliterated. "Vance, what are you waiting for? Help her!" I screamed, letting the raw terror in my voice take over. Vance flinched as if remembering I was in the room. He averted his eyes. "Right, an ambulance. I need to get a doctor." "Our private doctor?" he stammered. His panic now entirely fabricated. "I'll go get the car. I'll pick up Dr. Eris. His clinic is only 10 minutes away. You stay here, don't touch her." Without waiting for an answer, Vance spun around and sprinted out of the room. His footsteps thundered down the stairs. "Vance, don't leave me alone with her," I cried out. But he ignored me. I heard the heavy oak front door slam shut. Then, the roar of the SUV firing up, tires screeching against the asphalt as he sped away from the estate. I looked back down at Greta. Her seizures were slowing down, but the foam was still thick around her mouth. I scrambled to find my phone on the bed to dial 911 myself. But the moment I stood up, I heard a heavy clack from the front door downstairs, followed immediately by the electronic beep click of my bedroom's smart lock. I froze. I sprinted to the bedroom door and yanked the handle. Locked. I smashed the digital unlock button, but the LED indicator flashed red. Override activated. Vance had locked the house down from the master app on his phone. We were trapped. The grim reality washed over me. Vance didn't leave to find a doctor. He left to regroup with his accomplices, to figure out how to dispose of Greta's body without raising suspicion. He left me locked in a room with a dying woman. He had the money, the connections, and he had me cornered. I slid down the wooden door, burying my face in my hands as the tears finally spilled over. This was a nightmare. Greta had sacrificed her life to save mine, and now we were both going to die here. "Miss Sloane." A raspy whisper made my blood run cold. I snapped my head up, my eyes wide. The body that had been rigidly dying on the rug was moving. Greta casually wiped the foam from her mouth with the sleeve of her robe. She coughed mildly, then sat upright on the carpet. Her eyes, which had just been rolling in her skull, were sharp, focused, and entirely alive. "Greta?" I breathed out, wondering if I was hallucinating. Greta spat a piece of what looked like a thin rubber casing into her hand. She grimaced, wiping the sticky white residue off her chin. "Sorry to scare you half to death, sweetheart," she said. Her voice perfectly normal. She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a flattened foil packet. "Theatrical soap capsules. Found them in my late husband's footlocker when I was cleaning the attic. You know he used to do props for the ACT theater downtown." My jaw dropped. My brain couldn't compute what I was seeing. You weren't poisoned?" Greta offered a grim smile. "Oh, the cake was absolutely spiked. But I spat the top layer into my palm when I faked that first cough. I made sure my back was to him. I only swallowed the bottom sponge layer, which was clean." "But how? How did you know something was wrong with the cake?" I crawled toward her, grabbing her trembling shoulders. Greta's lined face turned dead serious. "My late son taught me a few things about smartphones. This afternoon, while Mr. Vance was in the shower, he left his phone unlocked on the kitchen island." I discreetly hit the voice memo record button. He was on the phone with a woman. Greta looked me dead in the eyes, a mix of deep pity and fierce vigilance. "Sloane, Mr. Vance, and that woman. They planned to knock you out cold tonight with that cake. He said he needed you completely unconscious to use your thumbprint and Face ID to transfer the corporate holdings into a shadow account. You have to believe me, that man is the devil." The temperature in the room plummeted. The truth slammed into my chest like a freight train. Vance wasn't planning to outright kill me tonight. He was going to put me in a medically induced coma and rob me blind. His plan was far more insidious than Delaney or I had imagined. I looked around my digitally locked bedroom. The terror that had gripped me evaporated, replaced by a dark, glowing ember of pure rage in my chest. If Vance thought he could drug me and steal my family's legacy, he had made a fatal miscalculation. The game was just beginning, and I refused to be the victim. "Are you okay? Does your stomach hurt?" I asked Greta, kneeling beside her and wiping the sweat from her forehead. She forced a tight smile, a little nauseous, maybe because some of it touched my tongue. "But I'm strong enough. We need to get out of this room." He locked the doors through the central mainframe. "I can't hack it," I said, standing up and scanning the room. My eyes landed on the heavy sliding glass door leading to the balcony. Our balcony connected to a wraparound portico that led to the guest bedroom windows, which still used manual locks. Greta, stay behind me. I'm making a door, I commanded. I grabbed a solid brass table lamp from the nightstand, ripping the cord out of the wall. I grabbed a heavy down blanket from the bed, draped it over the glass door to muffle the sound, and swung the brass base as hard as I could. Crash. The glass shattered. I reached through the hole, flipped the manual latch, and slid the door open. The freezing San Francisco Bay wind hit my face. Come on, careful of the glass. I helped Greta out onto the balcony. We navigated the low railing, stepped onto the sturdy portico roof, and crept over to the guest bedroom. Thank God, the window was unlocked. I pushed it open, helped Greta inside, and followed her. We were out of the trap. We hurried down the back staircase. The house was eerily silent. Once in the kitchen, I sat Greta down and pulled out my phone. There was only one person I could trust right now. My college best friend and high-powered corporate attorney, Blair Kensington. My hands shook as I hit speed dial. It rang 3 times before Blair's sharp voice answered. Sloan? It's late. What's going on? You aren't crying over that prick husband of yours again, are you? Blair asked, her tone dry. She had hated Vance since day one. Blair, listen to me carefully, I said, my voice a low, intense whisper. Vance tried to kill me tonight. Or rather, he tried to drug me into a coma with a poisoned cake to steal my biometric data and transfer the company assets. Greta ate the cake to save me. Dead silence on the line. When Blair finally spoke, the sarcasm was gone. She was in full litigation mode, cold, sharp, and calculating. Where are you right now? Are you hurt? Is Greta alive? We're in the downstairs kitchen. We broke out of the master suite. We aren't hurt. Greta faked swallowing the poison, but she needs to be looked at. Blair, I have to call 911. We can have SFPD waiting for him when he gets back. No. Blair's interruption was razor sharp. Do not call the police, Sloan. Not yet. Are you crazy? He tried to rob and murder me. Sloan, listen to me. This is a legal chess game. What's your evidence? A piece of cake? Vance will hire a $2,000 an hour defense attorney and claim he bought it from a bakery and had no idea it was tainted. He'll blame your corporate rivals or sue the patisserie. As for the assets, he hasn't moved a dime yet. In the eyes of the law, no financial crime has occurred. If you call the cops now, Vance becomes a witness, not a suspect. I bit my lip hard. Tasting copper. Damn it. She was right. My husband was a sociopath. He would have legal loopholes prepared if the plan went south. Calling the cops now would just make him lawyer up, cover his tracks, and try something worse later. Then what do? He's coming back. He said he was getting a doctor, but I know he's rallying his accomplices, I said, gripping the counter. We play his game, Blair said, her legal brain working at lightning speed. Step 1. We remove the star witness from his board without making him suspicious. Greta needs to disappear tonight. What do you mean? I have a private medical concierge I trust with my life. He runs a discreet, off-the-books clinic in Marin County. I'm sending a black SUV to your service alley right now to pick up Greta. When Vance gets back, you need to deliver the Oscar performance of your life. You have to be the hysterical, traumatized wife. Blair paused, letting it sink in. You tell Vance that Greta's condition rapidly deteriorated. You panicked and called her nephews the union guys from Oakland. Tell him they showed up in a truck, accused you of feeding her bad seafood, and dragged her away to a holistic clinic in the East Bay because they don't trust city hospitals. Tell him she's in a deep coma and likely won't make it through the night. My brain processed the brilliance of the lie. You want him to feel safe. Exactly, Blair confirmed. If Vance thinks Greta is comatose in some random clinic miles away, he won't feel threatened. He'll assume his poisoning was just a tragic misfire. He'll feel secure, and more importantly, he will reset his plan to steal your money. When he makes his next move with his guard down, we will trap him with undeniable smoking gun evidence. I looked at Greta. The older woman nodded firmly, signaling she was on board. Okay, I said, my voice hardening. Send the car now. To the back alley. I'll unlock the service gate. I'm in the car with the doctor now. Hang in there, Sloan. From this moment on, trust nothing that comes out of your husband's mouth, and do not eat or drink a single thing he gives you. We are going to destroy him. Click. I put the phone in my pocket and knelt in front of Greta. You heard her. Blair is taking you somewhere safe. You'll be looked after until this is over. Greta's eyes welled with tears. You be careful, Sloane. He is a dangerous man. I don't mind hiding, as long as you survive. 20 minutes later, a matte black SUV rolled down the dark alley with its headlights off. Blair stepped out wearing a leather trench coat, looking militant. A man with a medical bag quickly helped Greta into the back seat. Take care of her, Blair, I whispered, hugging my friend. She's safe with me. Tomorrow morning, I'm sending my best guy to your house. A private investigator. We're going to pull Vance's digital footprint from tonight. Now get back in there. Make the house look like a panic zone. And Sloane? Blair looked me dead in the eye. Break a leg. I nodded, locked the alley gate, and walked back inside. I went to the living room, deliberately knocking over a side table and smashing a heavy ceramic vase on the floor to create the illusion of a frantic struggle. I snuck back upstairs through the guest room and sat on the floor of my bedroom, right next to the shattered glass of the balcony door. I violently messed up my hair, smudged my mascara to look unhinged, and smeared a little bit of the raspberry coulis on my palm to simulate blood in the dim light. 10 minutes later, the front gates opened. The Range Rover pulled in. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and mentally murdered the naive woman who had ever loved Vance Whitmore. When I opened my eyes, I was a woman ready to drag her husband to hell. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Sloane! Sloane! I have a doctor, Vance yelled, faking a frantic tone. He rattled the doorknob, then used his phone to unlock it. The show was on. I buried my face in my knees, let my body shake violently, and unleashed a guttural, hysterical sob. The door slammed open. Sloane, honey! Vance rushed in, dropping to his knees. His large, warm hands gripped my shoulders. Jesus, are you bleeding? He yelled, seeing the red raspberry stain on my hands. I looked up at him slowly. If I hadn't known the truth, his performance would have completely fooled me. He looked exactly like a terrified, devoted husband. Incredible actor, I thought coldly. Vance. I whimpered, letting out broken, raspy sobs. The tears flowing down my cheeks were real, but they were tears of absolute revulsion. A stranger walked into the room carrying a vintage leather medical bag. He was thin, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and looked professional. This must be the fake doctor, Julian Eris. Where is the housekeeper, Mr. Whitmore? I need to examine her immediately, the man said, scanning the empty, chaotic room. Vance looked at him, then back at me. Sloane, where is Greta? Dr. Julian is here. I forced a horrific choking sob. They took her. Vance's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck jumped. Who took her? Where did she go? After you left, she got worse. She couldn't breathe. I panicked. I called her nephews from Oakland. I babbled, making my voice crack. They showed up in a pickup truck. They were furious, Vance. They saw the cake and accused us of feeding her bad food. They wouldn't wait for your doctor. They said city hospitals let working-class people die, so they carried her out and drove her to a holistic clinic in the East Bay. I tried to stop them, but they pushed me, and I fell into the lamp. I pointed at the shattered glass. Silence hung in the air. Beneath his hands on my shoulders, I felt Vance's rigid muscles suddenly go slack. The immense panic he had been radiating vanished. He let out a long breath, a breath of monumental relief that he tried desperately to hide. My God, Sloane, are you okay? Vance pulled me into a tight hug. Those blue-collar idiots, they might have just killed her moving her like that. But what matters is you're safe. You didn't eat the cake, right? No, Vance. I was too scared. I whispered into his chest, staring dead-eyed at the wall behind him. Vance looked up at Julian, who stood awkwardly by the door. Doctor, it seems the patient was forcibly removed by her family. I apologize for dragging you out here so late. Julian cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. He adapted to the narrative instantly. A shame. If her condition was that critical, a long drive will likely be fatal. But it's out of our hands. I'll take my leave, Mr. Whitmore. Please look after your wife. She is in severe shock. After the fake doctor left, Vance helped me into bed, pulling the covers over me with sickeningly sweet care. He got me water, wiped the blood off my hands with a warm towel, and whispered soothing lies into my ear. Go to sleep, sweetheart. Forget tonight. Tomorrow, I'll have my corporate fixers track down her family and throw some settlement money at them. Everything is going to be perfectly fine. He kissed my forehead. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness hide the venom in my stare. Yes, Vance. Everything is going to be fine. For me, not for you. By noon the next day, Vance left for the city, claiming he had an emergency board meeting, though he promised to be back early. He even hired a temp maid from an agency to clean up the broken glass and cook for me. He was playing the supportive husband flawlessly. At exactly 2:00 p.m., while the temp maid was doing laundry in the basement, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in his late 30s. He wore faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and a baseball cap, looking like an Xfinity cable tech. But his eyes were terrifyingly sharp. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Silas Thorne. Blair sent me, he said in a low, even voice. I pulled him inside. Hurry. I led Silas to my soundproof home office on the second floor and locked the door. Without a word of small talk, Silas dropped his tool bag, pulled out an iPad, and opened a thick manila folder. The man was a pure professional. Blair gave me the rundown at 3 a.m. I was pulling your husband's digital footprints, Silas began, swiping the iPad and sliding it across the desk. The screen showed surveillance photos of Vance sitting in a dimly lit Soma lounge, holding hands with a young, heavily made-up brunette. That's Tawny Blair, Silas said flatly. 26. They've been sleeping together for 8 months. He pays the lease on her luxury loft in the city. I stared at the photo. Oddly, I felt no heartbreak. The infidelity was a grain of sand compared to the mountain of his attempt to murder me. Just an affair. Why go through the trouble of drugging me for my assets? He could have just filed for a highly contested divorce. Because she isn't just a mistress, Mrs. Whitmore. She's a tactical asset, Silas said. He pulled a stack of hospital database printouts from his folder. Tawny was an administrative pharmacist at UCSF Medical Center. I pulled her employment records this morning. She was terminated with cause exactly 3 weeks ago. Why was she fired? Theft of Schedule II narcotics, Silas said, his voice dropping. I bribed a senior floor nurse named Maura to talk. Tawny was caught falsifying inventory to steal several ampules of high-grade midazolam, laced with propofol and a paralytic muscle relaxant. My heart hammered against my ribs. What does that combination do, Silas? It's an anesthetic cocktail used to put patients under for major surgery. It's not an Ambien you buy at CVS. If ingested, the target loses consciousness in minutes and enters a medically induced coma for 10 to 12 hours. Complete paralysis. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. The icy reality washed over me. The theatrical foam, the raspberry cake, his desperate insistence. It all connected perfectly. That's what was in the cake, I whispered in horror. If I ate it, I wouldn't just fall asleep, I'd be comatose. He'd have 12 hours to use my fingerprints, bypass Face ID, sign digital transfers, without any resistance. And if I overdosed and died, the medical examiner would rule it an accidental suicide via heavy sedatives. No cyanide, no arsenic. Just a depressed woman taking too many pills. Silas confirmed. It's a perfect, untraceable murder. The $10 million life insurance policy. Dr. Julian, I stammered. Who is that man? I ran his license plates. Julian Aris had his medical license revoked a decade ago for pill milling. He's a black market medic. Vance hired him to sign your fake death certificate if the overdose killed you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My house, my company, my life. He mapped it all out. Vance had the drugs, the corrupt notary, the fake doctor, and the perfect alibi. What's our next move, ma'am? Silas asked. Blair says you want to play the long game. The hospital theft is strong, but there's no physical proof connecting the drugs to Vance or the cake, since Greta spat it out and you cleaned the plates. You're right, we don't have a smoking gun. My voice turned to ice. Vance thinks he failed because of a random accident with the maid. He's too greedy to stop now. The notary is already pushing the insurance paperwork. What do you need me to do? Dig deeper. Find out everything about Wallace Gentry, the notary. Follow his bank accounts. And Silas. I paused, a dark thought surfacing. Pull the California Highway Patrol accident report from my parents' crash in Big Sur 3 years ago. Brakes failing on a brand new Mercedes SUV? I used to think it was a tragedy. Now, I doubt every single reality of my life. Silas looked at me, assessing my mental fortitude. He nodded slowly. It takes serious guts to hunt a predator inside his own cage. Keep playing the broken wife. I'll get you your ammo. For 3 agonizing days, I played the role of a woman who had lost her mind. The scenario Blair and I crafted worked perfectly. Vance fully believed Greta was rotting in some backwater clinic, incapable of speaking. Vance played the doting husband. He stayed home, fed me soup, stroked my hair while I faked crying, and even removed all sharp objects from the house, claiming I was unstable. Classic gaslighting. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. On the afternoon of the 4th day, Vance finally left for the city, citing an unavoidable board meeting. But I'd seen a text on his phone while he showered he was going to meet Wallace, the notary. As soon as his SUV disappeared down the street, I sprang out of bed. I sneaked up to Vance's locked study. I had made duplicate keys to every door in this house years ago. I unlocked his study and found his silver MacBook on the desk. I plugged in a black USB drive Silas had couriered to me that morning disguised as a DoorDash delivery. I put Silas on speakerphone. "I'm in," I whispered. "Good. Tap F12 until the screen flashes," Silas instructed from his own remote terminal. I did. The password prompt bypassed into a string of code, dropping me directly onto Vance's desktop. "I have remote access. Just watch the screen, Mrs. Whitmore." The cursor moved on its own. Silas dug past the mundane corporate files and opened a hidden folder titled Drafts 2023. Inside were offshore wire transfer receipts. Every 15th of the month, for the last 3 years, Vance had wired $5,000 to an account under Wallace Gentry's name. "That's hush money," Silas muttered through the phone. The cursor clicked into an archive of deleted, encrypted messages. It was a chat log between Vance and Wallace from 2 months ago. "Wallace. Inflation is high. My kid needs med school tuition. Bump it to $7,500 next month. Vance. Are you insane? We agreed on $5K. Don't push it, Wallace. Wallace. It's about mutual security, Vance. If the wire is short, my memory might suddenly return. Especially since that mechanic from the Monterey garage has been asking for a bigger cut. You wouldn't want him telling the cops who paid him to cut the brake lines on your in-laws' Mercedes before they hit the PCH, would you? Vance. You greedy fuck. Fine. $7,500. Make sure that grease monkey keeps his mouth shut permanently, or I'll bury you both in the same hole. The air vanished from the room. The hum of the laptop fan sounded like screeching metal against asphalt. The memory of the morgue in Monterey County exploded in my brain. The yellow body bags. The highway patrolman saying, "Total brake failure on the decline, ma'am." Tragic mechanical error. Vance had held me while I wept, playing the grieving son-in-law while mentally calculating his billion-dollar payout. He orchestrated the murder of my parents to ensure I inherited everything while we were married without a prenup. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you there?" Silas's alarmed voice snapped me back. "He murdered them," I whispered, my voice sounding like shattered glass. Tears didn't fall. They burned up in the absolute inferno of my rage. The naive Sloane died right then and there. "This is no longer fraud, ma'am. This is premeditated murder. But legally, screenshots of deleted encrypted chats can be argued as fabricated in court. We need a live confession. Or the mechanic. Pull the USB. Silas. Wipe your tracks, I commanded, my voice deadly calm. I'm calling Callahan. Detective Callahan was an SFPD investigator who had suspected foul play in my parents' crash 3 years ago, but lacked evidence. I had furiously defended my husband back then. How stupid I was. Set up a secure meeting tonight at Blair's penthouse. We aren't just divorcing this bastard. We are going to lock him in a cage for the rest of his natural life. That evening, a cold San Francisco drizzle coated my windshield as I drove to Blair's downtown penthouse. I had convinced Vance I needed a night away with my best friend to calm my nerves. He eagerly agreed, happy to have the house empty to plan his endgame. Inside Blair's apartment, the curtains were drawn tight. Silas sat at the dining table with his tech gear. Across from him sat Detective Callahan, a hardened man in a worn leather jacket with piercing eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore," Callahan greeted with a curt nod. "Last time we met, you threatened to sue me for suggesting your parents' crash wasn't an accident. I was a fool, Detective. You were right. My husband killed them. I'm here to ask for your help." Callahan sighed, his rigid posture softening. Silas briefed me on the wire transfers and the chat logs. It's a massive breakthrough. But legally speaking, it's weak. How is it weak? It's a written confession, Blair argued, her lawyer instincts flaring. It's a digitally recovered screenshot from an encrypted app. Counselor, Callahan countered sharply. A good defense lawyer will claim the laptop was hacked and the messages planted. And as for the mechanic? Silas and I checked. Jeter Cobb drowned in a reservoir 8 months ago. Ruled an accidental drunk drowning. Right around the time Vance authorized the payout increase to the notary, Vance silenced the only living witness. Silence fell over the room. Vance had killed 3 people and was gearing up for a 4th, so he gets away with it? I asked, my voice terrifyingly flat. I didn't say that, Callahan said, leaning forward. He failed to poison you because of the Maid. A predator on a timeline doesn't quit. He's going to try to kill you again. The only way to lock him up for life with 0 legal loopholes is to catch him in the act. An active sting operation. We wire your entire estate with high-res cameras and mics, patched directly to an SFPD server. We let him execute his plan. The moment he forces the documents and administers the drug, SWAT kicks the doors in. Are you insane? Blair slammed her hands on the table. You want to use my client as live bait for a serial killer? What if the poison hits her bloodstream before you breach? I agree to it, I said, cutting off the debate. Blair stared at me in shock. Sloan, this isn't a movie. This is your life. I will be the bait, I told Callahan. But how do I fake taking the drugs? He's going to bring that fake doctor to check my vitals. Callahan pulled a small, unmarked tin box from his jacket. Undercover narcotics trick. I'm giving you a highly specific, microdosed, beta blocker, and muscle relaxant. You take this exactly 10 minutes before they give you their poison. It will drastically drop your heart rate, dilate your pupils, and paralyze your extremities. You will medically appear to be in a severe coma. When they force the real pills into your mouth, you hide them under your tongue, fake swallowing the water, and spit them out the second they look away. If you panic, your heart rate spikes, the illusion breaks, and you die. I won't panic, I said without a sliver of doubt. Wire my house. 2 days later, Silas arrived at my house, disguised as a broadband technician while Vance was out. In under an hour, he rigged the estate with military-grade pinhole cameras hidden in the grandfather clock, the HVAC vents, and the smoke detectors, all linked to an SFPD command van parked down the block. When Vance returned, he wore a sinister smirk. Sloan, darling, I stopped by Dr. Julian's clinic today. He's coming over tonight. He has a special, highly concentrated sedative for you. It will put you in a deep, dreamless sleep for 12 hours. It will reset your nervous system. I looked into his eyes. Tomorrow, one of us would be dead or in a cage. Okay, Vance, I'll take it. At 8:00 p.m., the storm outside was raging. Vance brought me a bowl of soup. Eat a little. The sedative is strong. You can't have an empty stomach. I need to use the bathroom first, I murmured, my voice raspy. I locked the bathroom door, turned the sink on full blast, and pulled Callahan's tin box from my bra. I swallowed the beta blocker with a handful of tap water. Within minutes, my limbs felt like lead. A deep, heavy cold spread down my spine. My vision blurred at the edges, and my racing heart slowed to a sluggish thump. It was working. I stumbled out of the bathroom and intentionally bumped into the doorframe. Vance caught me, carrying me to the bed. The doorbell rang. Vance smiled. The doctor is here. Vance brought Julian up to the room. Julian checked my pulse and flashed a penlight in my eyes. Because of Callahan's drug, my pupils were sluggish, and my pulse was faint. She's exhausted. Her system is crashing, Julian declared. He pulled out a vial and tapped 2 dark blue capsules into Vance's hand. Midazolam and propofol. Vance lifted my head. Time for your medicine, sweetheart. He shoved the blue pills into my mouth. The bitter taste stung my tongue. Using the technique, I shoved them deep under my tongue. He tipped a glass of water to my lips. I swallowed the water loudly, bobbing my Adam's apple, keeping the pills trapped. He laid me down. I immediately pulled the thick duvet up to my chin, faking a violent shiver. Cold. I whimpered. I faked a coughing fit. Hack! Under the cover of the heavy blanket, I spat the blue pills and a mouthful of saliva directly into the duvet, crushing the fabric in my fist to hide them. I closed my eyes. I let my jaw go slack. I slowed my breathing to a crawl. Silence filled the room. Julian grabbed my wrist again. He checked my pulse, then peeled my eyelid back. Perfect, Julian whispered victoriously. The cocktail hit her fast because she was already weak. She is officially a living rag doll. You could chop her finger off and she wouldn't blink. Vance let out a dark, booming laugh. Finally. God, playing the devoted husband was making me sick to my stomach. Is the dose enough to stop her heart? Give it 5 or 6 hours. Her respiratory system will just quietly shut down. Julian confirmed. Excellent. Call Wallace and Tawny. They're waiting in a car down the street. Grab her legs. We're doing the paperwork downstairs on the glass table. They hoisted my limp body up like a sack of garbage, carrying me down the grand staircase and dumping me onto the leather sofa in the living room. My head lolled to the side. Through the thinnest slit of my eyelids, I saw the hidden camera in the grandfather clock directly across from me. Are you watching, Callahan? The front doors opened. Tawny, in a tight red dress, strutted in and threw her arms around Vance, kissing him deeply right in front of my dying body. You did it, baby! Tawny squealed. She walked over and tapped my cheek mockingly. Poor little billionaire. Look at her now. Just a slab of meat. Enough gloating, Wallace the notary grunted, lugging a heavy briefcase onto the coffee table. He pulled out stacks of legal documents. Let's move. I have the absolute power of attorney, the transfer deeds for the tech shares, and the $10 million life insurance payout forms. You're sure her distant relatives can't contest this? Vance asked, his eyes gleaming with greed. Wallace laughed, a slimy, corrupt sound. Once her thumbprint and Face ID are on this paper, it's ironclad. Much cleaner than having a mechanic cut her parents' brake lines in Big Sur, eh? Vance smirked. I paid a fortune to orchestrate that crash, and even more to drown that mechanic. I've earned this empire. Give me the ink pad. Gotcha. A full, undeniable confession recorded in 4K audio and video. Wallace opened a red ink pad. Vance grabbed my limp right hand and forcefully pressed my thumb into the ink. Let's get this over with. He aimed my inked thumb toward the signature line on the $1 billion share transfer deed. 10 inches. 5 inches. I didn't have to wait anymore. The adrenaline exploding in my veins incinerated the lingering effects of the beta blocker. 1 inch from the paper, my eyes snapped wide open. Not the groggy, half-lidded stare of a dying woman. I glared at Vance with the absolute cold-blooded fury of an executioner. With a violent jerk, I ripped my hand out of Vance's grip. Vance gasped, stumbling backward. In the chaotic movement, my red-inked thumb dragged across the collar of his pristine white Tom Ford shirt, leaving a streak that looked exactly like a slashed throat. The room froze. Vance stared at me, his jaw unhinged, looking as though a corpse had just sat up in its coffin. Tawny's laugh died in her throat. Wallace dropped his pen. S. Sloan? Vance squeaked, his voice cracking. You miscalculated, I said. My voice was a low, terrifyingly calm rumble. I slowly sat up on the sofa, wiping the sweat from my brow. I looked at the fake doctor. I spat your pills into the blanket. You, absolute quack. I turned my dead gaze back to my husband. And you, Vance, did you really think I was crying over a maid? I was crying because being in the same room as the man who murdered my parents made me violently ill. You know, Vance whispered, taking another step back. Before he could process the destruction of his empire, hell rained down on Atherton. Boop! Boop! The deafening shriek of police sirens shattered the silence. Red and blue strobe lights blasted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting their terrified faces in neon panic. San Francisco police, nobody move! A voice boomed over a megaphone. Crash! The heavy mahogany front doors were obliterated by a SWAT battering ram. A dozen officers in tactical gear flooded the living room. Assault rifles raised. Get on the ground! Show me your hands! Tawny let out a blood-curdling scream, dropping to the floor and sobbing hysterically. Wallace tried to grab his briefcase, but an officer tackled the heavy man, slamming him face-first into the glass coffee table, shattering it. Julian dropped to his knees instantly, putting his hands behind his head. Vance stood frozen in the center of the room. His eyes darted frantically. Detective Callahan strolled through the shattered doorway, his gun holstered but his presence dominating the room. Silas followed, holding a live feed tablet. Vance Whitmore, Callahan boomed. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and the homicides of the Sterling family and Jeter Cobb. What murder? You have no proof. My wife is insane. I'm just signing legal papers. Vance stammered, clinging to a delusion. Callahan smiled coldly. He pointed at the grandfather clock. Your house has been a live SFPD broadcast studio since noon. We have you on tape admitting to the brake lines, the drowning, and the poisoning. Vance's knees buckled. Tawny looked up from the floor, mascara running down her face. He made me do it. He promised me half the money. I'll testify against him. I want a deal, she shrieked. Shut up, you bitch! Vance roared, lunging at her. Two SWAT officers slammed him into the hardwood floor, driving a knee into his spine and aggressively ratcheting steel handcuffs onto his wrists. Get your hands off me! I own this estate! Vance screamed, thrashing like a caged animal. You don't own shit, a sharp voice echoed. Blair walked through the door, and right behind her, looking perfectly healthy in a warm coat, was Greta. Next to her was Mara, the nurse from the hospital. Vance stared at Greta like he was looking at a ghost. Greta looked down at him with pure disgust. You thought working-class people were just props in your little play, Mr. Vance. I've been waiting to watch you choke on your own arrogance. Vance stopped thrashing. He slumped against the floor, realizing the absolute, inescapable finality of his ruin. I stood up from the sofa. I walked through the broken glass and scattered billion-dollar documents, stopping right in front of where Vance was pinned to the floor. An officer yanked Vance's head up by his hair so he had to look at me. Remember the morgue in Monterey? I whispered, my voice arctic. You held me and promised to take care of me forever. You were just measuring me for a coffin. Sloan, please. I'm sorry, he begged, his eyes filled with pathetic despair. You aren't sorry. You're just caught, I replied. I leaned in inches from his face. My suffering ends tonight. Yours is just beginning. Enjoy federal prison. I stood up and turned my back to him forever. Get this trash out of my father's house, detective. As they dragged Vance and his crew out into the storm, the sirens began to fade. Blair wrapped her arms around me. You did it, Sloan. It's over. The tears that finally fell were not of grief, but of profound relief. A crushing weight lifted off my chest. I looked over at Greta, who pulled me into a warm maternal hug. 2 months later, the morning California sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the CEO's office in the financial district. I sat in the executive leather chair that once belonged to my father. On my desk, the Wall Street Journal featured a front-page headline. Tech heir's husband, sentenced to life without parole, in bizarre murder plot. The trial had been swift. The audio-visual recordings decimated his defense. Tawny's testimony locked him away, though she still caught 15 years. Wallace lost his license and his freedom. A gentle knock brought me out of my thoughts. Greta walked in, carrying a silver tray with chamomile tea and biscotti. She wasn't just my estate manager anymore. She was my chief of personal staff, and the only family I had left. Your tea, Madam CEO? Greta smiled warmly. The past is gone. It's your time to shine. I took a sip of the tea. It was warm and sweet, entirely washing away the phantom bitterness of the blue pills. The storm had passed, and the rats had drowned in their own traps. I looked out over the San Francisco skyline. My life, my legacy, and my future were finally in my own hands. The play was over, and a new Sloane Sterling had taken the stage.